Let's say that I want to eat my computer. Not metaphorically eat my computer, not hyperbolically eat my computer, but literally eat my entire computer. I want to take it apart, bit by bit, and consume it. I want to masticate the motherboard, digest my drives, chew on my CPU, and so on. This is unequivocally a bad idea, for several reasons. First and foremost, I need my computer to play Factorio, and if I eat it, I can no longer play Factorio, and that's unacceptable. Secondly, I will probably die, or at the very least, sustain some serious stomach injuries. Third, I don't know, eating a computer is just weird. All of that being said, it is my computer. It is my stomach. Who is anyone to tell me that I'm not allowed to consume this machine? Consequences be damned. Thank You for Smoking follows protagonist Nick Naylor, a lobbyist for the tobacco industry. Mr. Naylor is nothing if not a stalwart defender of big tobacco, one of the most reviled industries in America. He stands upon the bulwark, eager to defend his liege from all those who would deign to topple his beloved corporation. But instead of bright sword gleaming, Naylor uses his prowess with the spoken word to beat back the horrors that would see this liege dethroned. Chief among these usurpers is Senator Fenister, an individual taking a strong stance against smoking. The means by which the politician aims to topple the tobacco companies is by implementing a mandatory warning label on cigarette packs, the skull and crossbones, a symbol ubiquitously associated with poison. While the government proceedings play out in the background, Mr. Naylor goes about his daily life, spinning the myriad of controversies that big tobacco finds itself in a more positive light. From going on talk shows with cancer kids, to schmoozing Hollywood executives in an effort to put smoking back in movies, to bribing cowboys dying of lung cancer, Mr. Naylor is shown to be willing to go to great lengths and ostensibly eschew morality to bolster the profits of big tobacco. But all of these efforts are not without their cost. As the film begins to climax, Mr. Naylor is kidnapped by a group of anti-tobacco activists. These individuals bind him and gag him before placing nicotine patch after nicotine patch on his person, to an extent that Mr. Naylor essentially overdoses on nicotine. A lesser man would have fallen, but Mr. Naylor is no lesser man. Despite his harrowing experience, an experience that doctors say would have killed him if not for his significant tolerance to nicotine, Nick Naylor lives. His life is literally saved by smoking. This victory is undercut when he is betrayed by the seductress that he had been confiding in. Throughout the course of the movie, Nick had been sleeping with a reporter that he had been warned was dangerous and not to be trusted. These warnings proved to be legitimate, as shortly after his life-threatening incident, this woman published an article she had been working on, an article besmirching the name of Big Tobacco, an article besmirching the names of Mr. Naylor's comrades, the Merchants of Death, an article that would not have been possible if Nick had not spilled the proverbial beans to this newsroom siren. The fallout is catastrophic. Naylor is fired and spirals into depression. He revels in his misery for but a moment before he is reminded of who he is and what he is good at by his son. The silver-tongued lobbyist rallies. He puts the reporter and her tempter's tactics on full blast in the media, outing her to her coworkers and humiliating her. He apologizes to the Mod Squad for his breach of their trust and reinvigorates this relationship. And he goes to the Senate hearing, head held high, eager to once again prove his value to big tobacco. During the Senate hearing, Nick Naylor does what Nick Naylor does best. The senators questioning him do their best to point out the perils of tobacco, but these efforts are in vain. Because sure, smoking kills. Everyone knows that smoking kills. Why is the extra warning label necessary? Should there be a warning label on cars because of automobile accidents? On airplanes for similar reasons? Should there be a warning label on cheese? Because while smoking kills, this death count pales in comparison to the real reaper in America, heart disease. The senators all have vested interests in these varying industries and have no rebuttal for the impassioned pontification of Nick Naylor. The film culminates by heralding the rhetorical victory of the lobbyist and Nick being offered his old job back, but he declines. Instead, the stalwart warrior opts to strike out on his own, becoming a sword for hire, otherwise known as a consultant, using his substantial talent for speechcraft to defend the defenseless, like cell phone companies. On the most basic level, one could say that this movie is commenting on the perils of smoking. I would say that this is about 25% true, if I'm being charitable. This movie is very good across several metrics. Simply put, To have a movie this good be about something so obvious and banal would be insane. Smoking is bad, you say? Fascinating, tell me more. The only reason that I say that the perils of smoking angle is not entirely beside the point is that there does seem to be a semi-substantial amount of commentary, not necessarily on the perils of smoking, but on the unscrupulous nature of the industry that sells cigarettes. The movie isn't trying to say that cigarettes are bad for you because, as stated earlier, fucking duh, but Thank You for Smoking does shed some light on the industry that is trying to obfuscate such an obvious point. But even this point is presented with so much more nuance than big tobacco evil. Look at the scene with Sam Elliott. Mr. Elliott is playing the part of a cowboy. Shocking, I know. That is dying of lung cancer after advertising cigarettes for years, and is very vocal about this fact. Nick is tasked with bringing the good old country boy a suitcase full of money. Not as a bribe per se, but as a gift. Sam Elliott gets to keep the money whether or not he ceases his crusade against cigarettes. Like I said, this isn't a bribe, but it walks right up to that line. On the surface, this interaction can be viewed as an immoral act perpetrated by the evil tobacco industry, but where the nuance comes into play is when Nick lays out the two options that the cowboy has. Option A. Sam Elliott is so disgusted at this vile display that he plasters it all over the news. He calls up every reporter that will talk to him and tells them, "The tobacco companies just gave me a suitcase full of money to shut me up," and so on. The press will leap on this. They will eat it up. They will crucify big tobacco. The money, obviously, will have to be donated to charity. The noble cowpoke surely cannot keep these ill-gotten gains, particularly after causing such a commotion. Option B. Keep the money and use it to provide for his family. Of these two options, one is clearly moral and the other is immoral. One is good and one is bad. The only issue is, the good one will make the chooser feel bad, and the bad one will make the chooser feel good. Sam Elliott opts to keep the money and keep his mouth shut, and that is what this movie is really about. Personal agency. The cowpoke knew that he was choosing to do a bad thing. He knew the ramifications of that bad thing and chose to do it anyway. The movie really isn't about smoking or not smoking. That's not even necessarily the central conflict. No one is suggesting an outright ban on cigarettes, simply additional labeling on the packaging. This label isn't even being suggested out of sincere concern for the health of the nation, but more as a mechanism to ostensibly bolster the political career of the antagonist. Because, as is pointed out in the closing speech of the film, if there was some sort of legitimate health benefit to additional warning labels, there would have to be warning labels on everything. Planes crash, cars crash. Should there be a picture of a fiery wreck plastered on the side of every sedan? Junk food, in the case of the film, more pointedly cheese, leads to heart disease. Should there be a picture of a person having a heart attack on every Big Mac wrapper? Why are cigarettes different from any of these things? The answer is, they really aren't. In the words of Stizza Crack, life causes cancer. Everything that we enjoy has the potential to harm us. That is the nature of existence. But as adults, we're given the choice of which risks to engage in and which risks to avoid. We should be able to do what we want, as long as it doesn't hurt others. On a micro scale at least. This video, and I believe this movie, are not promoting full-bore libertarianism. Taxation isn't theft, private industry isn't the solution to all of society's ills, regulation is important, and so on. But, broken clocks and all that. Personal agency is paramount when it comes to a free society, but personal agency means being able to do things that have the potential to harm ourselves in the long term in exchange for short-term pleasure. But that's okay. That is better than okay. In fact, it is optimal when compared to the alternative of a prosperous but bland existence. If such a thing is one's choice, that's fine, but the choice ought not to be foisted upon others. We should have the freedom to eat a cheeseburger instead of a salad. We should have the freedom to go skydiving, even though it represents a significant chance of injury. We should have the freedom to smoke a cigarette. We should have the freedom to eat our entire computer if we want to, because without these freedoms, what even is there? Two quick film nerd things here at the end. First is something that I found really interesting. Even though cigarettes and smoking are core motifs of the movie, there's not a single instance of a person smoking on camera. This can be interpreted in any number of ways, but in light of the whole ass rant that I just did, I'm just gonna say that it's a cool thing that might have gotten missed if not pointed out. The second and last is the color palette. Not all, but most of the shots in this movie have a sort of yellowish, brownish, sepia-type tone to them. For those of you that do not smoke or have never been around someone who smokes, this might not seem like a big deal, but this coloration is reminiscent of the thin film that accumulates on everything that surrounds a smoker. Using this coloration just gives the sense that the film was shot through a thin layer of this residue, which I just think is a really neat touch.